Welcome to the Freedom Founder Podcast. I'm your host, Zach Duggar. Now, for some, the worst nightmare occurs if they ever have to face bankruptcy or losing it all, losing capital, losing resources, having a venture go down. But for others, it's really just a comma, just a short pause in their continued financial journey as they shift and move into other successes along the way. And my guest today is Jerry, and Jerry has got a little bit of a story to share on his experience with the losing it all and being able to bounce back, and also where he's at now with helping others to shape and improve their financial success and their future as well. So, Jerry, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thank you, Zach. It's great to be on. I appreciate you having me. I'm excited to dive into this with our audience today.
Absolutely. I love these conversations as I find that everyone's journey is a little bit different, and the nuances are also valuable to individuals who may share and relate in these experiences. So, with your journey, talk a little bit about your career path as you just got started in the career world. Where were you going? What were you doing? What were you hoping to accomplish? And what happened when you lost it all? What kind of experience were you at then? And just let's get into that.
For sure, yeah. So I got into the financial services industry at the age of 18. And
Okay.
so, I came from a background, I grew up in Alaska. So I came from a background of, sports. I was a bodybuilder. My number one goal in life was to go win Mr. Olympia and then own a gym someday. And so
Okay.
I actually became a personal trainer right out of high school. And,
Excellent.
I kind of climbed to the top of that ladder, and that was a glass ceiling. It didn't have a lot of upward mobility.
Okay.
But I kind of transitioned from that into financial services, and I got my licenses, and I really started on what I would consider like the retail side of the industry.
Yeah.
401ks, mutual funds, stocks, bonds, kind of the normal stuff that most people do for retirement planning.
Yep.
And so I became very successful at that. I earned endorsements from people like Dave Ramsey,
Yep.
in several different states. So I really built that up, and then I transitioned from that into more alternative assets. I realized that the
Okay.
wealthy, they do a lot more with real estate. They do a lot more with hard assets. And so I built my business up and I built my investments up. And so that was an experience of, kind of evolving, from the age of 18 until, maybe 25, 26. And I really started seeing a lot of success with that business.
Yeah.
And with that, for anyone that's an entrepreneur, right, you get cash flow from your business or from,
Yep.
profit from your business. It's going to be reinvested or put it into assets.
Yep.
So I was doing a bit of both, but I was putting a lot of it into assets. I was investing in, private real estate funds, some different alternative
Sure.
assets. That was going very well. And so, kind of the quiet before the storm, right? Everything was going perfect. And
Yeah.
then one day I got an email, and the email was an alert saying that a fund that I had invested in Alaska committed fraud.
Okay.
And so basically, with that, there's the fund itself that I was invested in, and so essentially they had lost everyone's money. It was a trading fund.
Okay.
They false reported their returns. So when you log in and your statements say you've been making money, you could put money in, you could pull money out. So there's really, to the naked eye, it looked and felt like everything was fine, right?
Yep.
Um, so it turned out they were misreporting their returns, which there's nothing wrong with losing money in a fund. Obviously, it's not ideal, but it's not illegal to
Right.
lose money. What is illegal is to misreport statements and make the numbers look other than what they are.
Right.
So that's really what was occurring. And then it happened that a real estate fund I was investing in had undisclosed counterparty risk with the fraudulent fund. So the
Okay.
majority of my net worth between these two funds, and the one that committed fraud was completely lost. And the
Yeah.
real estate one, fortunately, because it's real estate, it wasn't lost. It's just illiquid. And so the fund that, they'd sold off a lot of their properties. The economy was doing
Yep.
well. They needed a holding account. They were looking at buying other assets. And before they could redeploy capital, that holding account was part of this other fund where the fraud had
Okay.
occurred. So basically with that, the majority of my net worth in my investments was, between these two funds. And that was
Right.
definitely a hit, right? Definitely an eye opener and something that you
Yeah.
don't expect or plan for.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's one that can really bring someone down. I mean, I shared this on a podcast, which I might have gotten into this conversation briefly with you, but I had invested early on in my life in a fund that resulted in being a Ponzi scheme and lost at that point what amounted to 2 years of my salary at the time.
Oh,
So,
wow.
I can relate to this feeling. So you must have been a little bit distraught or depressed feeling at the time. I'm going to jump to that conclusion, but tell me about how you were feeling at the time when this occurred.
When you lose money, there's two ways you can go about it, right? And the first way is you put money in things that you pretty much know you could lose and you're fine with.
Okay.
And I think that one doesn't sting as badly, right? Because
Yep.
it's kind of like buying crypto, for example. You go
Sure.
in, you're like, I could lose all of it or I could become rich. It's kind of a coin flip. We'll
Yep.
see what happens. And so when you're doing that, when you do lose, it's kind of like, okay, yeah, I saw that coming. It's a
Yeah.
very different experience when you invest in something that you did all of the things you're supposed to do, due diligence and
Hmm.
understanding it, and all the basics are done. But because of someone else's unethical activity,
Right.
you end up losing, and it's nothing you could have controlled or done differently. Otherwise, other than predicting that was going to happen, right? So
Right.
for me, that was kind of like, okay, I had to really look at what could I have done different.
Yeah.
Um, and the mistake that a lot of investors can fall into is when you lose money, it's not a fun experience, and it can put you into like fear and some consideration and reservation on investing again because you don't want to repeat that same experience.
Yeah. Right.
Um, and so, just with my financial background and knowledge, I was able to identify exactly what went wrong and
Okay.
differentiate that from other investments,
Okay.
which prevented me from saying, Zach, all investments are bad. All
Yeah.
investments are risky. I'm just going to leave my money in cash and never invest again because I'm afraid of losing it.
Yeah.
So when I had to look at it, and I had this analogy with investing, and I had to add to it because I really looked at, okay, well, what was the thing that if I had known or done differently would have prevented this from occurring? And that's kind of the first thing I inspected.
Yeah.
And so investing at its root, the etymology of that word, it actually means to clothe your capital.
Okay.
And so when you're picking clothing out, even for ourselves individually, we would pick out clothing only if we like it, we understand
Hmm.
it fits us, it fits our goals. It's vital. Like we're going to make sure we're wearing pants before we go spend money on a $500 pair of shoes,
Yeah.
and then also things that aren't overpriced. And so investing would be similar, where if we're clothing our money, we would only invest in clothing for the money that we like, we understand, it fits us as investors, it fits the things we're using it for.
Okay.
It's a vital asset and it's not overpriced. And that for me had been golden up to that point. But the part that was missing was I want clothing I can control.
Yep.
Right. So, when I think
Sure.
about with myself individually, I don't want to be wearing a pair of pants where I go to the office and like that, someone can take them away from me. Like I
Right.
want my pants.
Yep.
And so with investing, same thing is I realized I was investing in something I didn't fully control.
Okay.
The trading aspect, I knew the surface level of it, but I didn't know it well enough to, request a trading statement and say, let me see the profit and loss and do an
Right.
analysis and understand that side of it. So, those are the little things that I had to look at. When I have an incident like that, the first thing I look at for myself, and this is just because I've done this for so long, is don't
Yep.
repeat the thing that just happened.
Yep.
Right. I need to bypass whatever it was. So I don't put money in funds anymore because of that. It's like, okay, I want to control the asset.
Yeah.
And then I need to look at, okay, well, what happened? And that's where I started to really come up with, well, I didn't have full control over it. I had understanding over the idea of the investment, but not the investment itself, or the fact that a fund really is like a small business. There's
Uh-huh.
management, there's people involved. Um,
Right.
so I tried not to sit too long in the woe is me,
Yeah.
that, because that's where you go wrong, right? That's where you start to feel
Right.
bad for yourself, and it just kind of gets worse.
Yep.
And then the other thing that I did is I made up my mind that I wasn't going to try and make the money back.
Okay.
That doesn't exist in any sense
Hmm.
of the word. When you lose money in an investment, you don't ever make it back. You just make
Yeah.
money from where you are now.
Okay.
And so that was kind of my thought is, okay, cool. I'm not going to sure, the thing was a fraud, it's being investigated. Maybe they'll get the money back, but I need to go earn more income and do more saving and make more smart decisions so that if
Yeah.
none of that money ever comes back, I'm still fine. I'm still going to keep going and making progress.
Yeah. No, I like that perspective. And I haven't really heard before the etymology of the word investing and considering clothing your investment or you're clothing your money in something you understand, something you can wear, something that you like.
Mhm.
and that you can control. I like that perspective, and I like the attitude that you approach that with, that you couldn't rest in the woe is me, but having to look at what are the opportunities, what can I learn from this, and now what can I do going forward, not to regain what was lost, but to gain something new. Like, so again, another thought I hadn't really had before, because in that example I gave of my own experience, I rested in that for probably 2 years of trying to follow court cases of this Ponzi scheme, and
Mhm.
believing that I was going to get something back, and at some point coming to that conclusion that's not going to happen. So, wow.
Yeah. And I really, on that point, Zach, I'm glad you
Yeah.
brought that up too, is that I really try to avoid the news stories.
Hmm.
My rule is if it's on the news, it's probably not true. And their goal is to
Right.
sell ratings, not actually inform the public. So when
Sure.
I first saw the few news stories, I actually felt worse. And
Okay.
so anytime I look at something and feel worse, I've realized that that's the intention of it, right? They want me glued to the news story. And so, especially in a fraudulent case with investments, like there's this factor of injustice, especially for the investor. It's like I
Yep.
did everything I should have done, I did everything right. And because of this dishonest person, it cost me a lot of money, or it cost me all of
Yep.
my money, whatever that loss was. So it's normal to feel like you want to have that justice enforced and you
Right.
want to have the money come back. And it's very easy to get stuck into that,
Yep.
but there's no control. You don't have control over that. And unfortunately, the way that our court systems work is the attorneys are out to earn legal fees. So if they think
Yep.
there's money to be gotten out of a settlement, great, they're going to pursue it. If not, then they're going to bill as many hours as they can. And once you're out of money to pay them, they're not really going to
Sure.
pursue the case much further.
Right.
I started doing more research, and I learned that investment fraud, like financial related fraud, is a $10 billion problem in America.
Wow.
And in this case, this particular fund, they defrauded investors out of about $35 million. It was about 130 or 140 different investors.
Yeah.
And, I looked at that and I started researching similar incidents, and I realized that was actually small. 35
Yeah.
million sounds like a lot, but I was seeing 200 million, half a billion, like these
Right.
really huge numbers. And the
Yeah.
people don't even go to prison. They get fined by the SEC. They're told you need to repay people, but you can't really
Yep.
enforce that on someone. It's like collecting on a broke person. Uh,
Right.
so it's kind of like you have to come to the conclusion of like, I'm not going to let this ruin me. Like
Yeah.
I'm going to learn my lesson. It's like really expensive tuition. I paid the
Yeah.
tuition. Let me get every learning experience I can out of this, and then let me move forward.
Yeah.
And it kind of even ties into, like, I don't know if you've been paying attention to the recent bank failures. In the
Yeah.
last 2 months, we've had 4, 5, 6 major bank failures in the world, where
Right.
again, people put money with an institution and they do all the right things, and that institution does something unethical, dishonest, unintelligent, or whatever. And
Yeah.
the individual pays the price of that. And there's really not a lot of recourse other than, A, being preventative on the front end of doing a better job next time of where we put our money, but B,
Yep.
doing everything we can to get back in good shape.
Right. Right. So with that in mind, getting back in good shape, at some point you started Wealth Dynamics. Was
Mhm.
that after this occurred, or was that prior to? Or talk about a little bit about that, starting up that company and the work that you're doing now, because from your experiences, you're able to help educate, support, train others in being able to be more financially savvy and invest for their future.
Yeah, so Wealth Dynamics, it definitely was years before the investment
Okay.
thing happened.
Yep.
So it was kind of an evolution, right? I went from that retail side of the industry,
Uh-huh.
and I would sit down with people, Zach, and I would talk to not a lot, but a select few people. I would talk to them about, hey, let's do a retirement plan. Let's put money in mutual funds. Let's put money in
Yeah.
annuities. And they had no interest in it.
Okay.
And the common denominator that I saw is these individuals were already wealthy.
Hmm.
And it seemed like when I had these conversations, they knew something about money that I didn't know, despite the fact that I had all of my state and federal financial licenses.
Yeah.
And so I would leave these just completely perplexed. Like, why can't I get these kind of clients to want to work with me? And so as I
Sure.
started researching, and looking at, okay, well, what are wealthy people actually doing? I started studying people like John Rockefeller and Andrew
Hmm.
Carnegie and J.P. Morgan and the Vanderbilts, and the Rothschilds and these large, I call them old, wealthy, dead people. They have a long track record. We can look at their lives from start to finish, and they were true testaments of how you build wealth.
Yeah.
And I started seeing that a lot of them were investing in small businesses. They were investing in real estate. They were using gold and silver. They were actually heavily using life insurance, which was mind blowing to me. And I started seeing like what are actually like the wealthy doing. And I realized that they don't use the retail stuff. The retail stuff is actually really new. The 401k has only been out since 1980. The traditional IRA came out in the 70s. The Roth IRA came out in the late 90s. Like, I have
Right.
clients that they see this and they're like, wow, like I'm older than the 401k is. If they're in their 50s and 60s, it's like I predate this thing. So that was kind of my transition into like, I want to do what the wealthy actually do. And I started doing that for myself, and I started seeing huge differences. I felt a lot more in control over my finances. I was able to get the results I was looking for. And so then I really was like, okay, this is what my calling is. I want to teach clients this. And that's what Wealth Dynamics is. So the name Wealth Dynamics, wealth means abundance and prosperity. Right. And then dynamics, there's several dynamics of our lives. Right. And so it really means abundance and prosperity in all dynamics of life, and the ability to financially fund that. And so wealth financially is a means to an end of living a life by design, living the way we really want to in every single area, where all areas are doing well. And money just happens to be something we're going to need, because that kind of lifestyle isn't cheap, and it's going to be something we need resources for. So that's kind of our mission, and what we're about is taking, the truth about money, these old proven historic money concepts, these wealth concepts, and sharing that with the everyday individual, family, entrepreneur, so that they can achieve greater financial freedom in their lives. So that really is a big part of it. And even the fraud thing, right? Like losing money on that, I hate it. I wish it didn't happen. I can't change it. But that's an aspect of like, okay, this is something that people need to be educated on. It's not an isolated case. It's a giant problem. It increased by over 100% year over year last year. $10 billion per year issue. So even that experience has allowed me to say, hey, I built it brick by brick from the ground up, following these principles. And because I wasn't educated on this one little aspect, which is not something you would think you need to be educated on, but apparently you do. That I have that ability now to teach clients to look out for the same things and create that awareness level of, okay, let's build wealth. And also let's make sure that we're putting money in places that are reliable, where we can't lose because of someone else's decisions.
Yeah. Okay. So now you are working one-on-one with clients and also in group context, or tell me about how you are working with clients now, and also that additional sources of education that you're putting out there to help people get this information. I understand you also wrote a book.
Yes. So my company, we work with clients in a couple different capacities. We do have, group events. Every Saturday we do a financial education course. And I've done this every year for like the last 4 or 5 years. And that's basically open to the general public. And it's sharing some of these basic truth concepts about money, so that anyone on Facebook or Zoom or YouTube or whatever can tune in and be part of that and start to get educated. We do a ton of content on all platforms: TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, really just giving free value. And I love that. And I owe that to the fact that if it wasn't for people that did that for me, I would have never learned what I learned. Right. It was someone that took the time out of their life to say, hey, I'm going to teach you this. They didn't want to, charge me money for it or anything. They're just like, it matters to me that you know these concepts. And I feel like that's something that, not a lot of people have access to, in their immediate sphere. And so that's a lot of what we do on a group scale. And then we work one-on-one with clients too. So the biggest thing we do first is education. So we have an online financial education platform that's got probably at this point 500 hours of content and education on almost every topic you can imagine. If there's a dollar sign in front of it, we've got education on it. And so that's going to be something that clients can actually go through on a virtual platform. They train, they watch videos, there's quizzes, there's tests. We actually have training supervisors on staff who their full-time focus is helping clients get through their training and giving them customized programs on if I'm trying to learn about taxes, here's all the courses that I should watch and here's all the training I should do. Or if I'm wanting to learn about real estate, here's a custom program for that. So the education is big, and that is where the books come into. I've got at this point, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, I think 10 books published.
Nice. Okay.
On finances. And those are things that, again, they're very cheap and easy to access. Some of them we give away for free. I just published an ebook last week on how to protect yourself from bank failures. That's one that we're just giving out for free because it's something that people really need right now. So that's kind of the education side. And then the other thing we do, Zach, is we work with clients on their personal strategy. So we have staff, we have a team of endorsed wealth mentors who have gone through training with me one-on-one and gone through our material, and they're very familiar with the systems and processes we use, and they'll actually work with clients on, okay, cool, if you're in debt, how do we get you out of debt and get you to the point where you're starting to invest? If you're already an investor, how do we help you get better returns, reduce taxes, maybe do your estate plan? And it's really from phase 0 of like, I'm just starting, all the way up to the sophisticated or accredited investor. And the goal is to achieve passive income that exceeds savings, expenses, and taxes. And that's the point where individual does not have the obligation of trading time for money anymore. And I think that's really where it's like, you can do what you want to do without ever thinking about money. And I think that that's a very special place to be able to live in.
Okay. Sounds like you have resources to help people at all stages, then, from someone who's just starting off in their financial success journey to somebody who has gotten to that point where they're an accredited investor, have generated passive income, or looking to sustain that ongoing.
For sure. Exactly. Wow. We definitely do.
Okay. Now, if somebody wanted to just kind of get a glimpse into what you're doing, is there a resource or way for them to just connect with some of your materials to get an idea of how this might work or benefit them?
Yeah. So I would say probably the best point is follow me on social media. We do tons of videos, informational content. We're probably the most active on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram. And all 3 of those is just Jerry Feta, just my first and last name. And so follow us there. And then basically at that point, grab a book, download an ebook. We've got podcasts, we've got free courses. Like, all of this is stuff that we put out there just so you have the education. Even if you never become a client, if I'm able to help impact the life of someone with information that causes them to build wealth. One of my books here, this one is called Blueprint to Financial Freedom. And this gives the step-by-step. Like, this is the system we help clients with. And it's the coolest thing, Zach. I've had clients, they're not even clients, just people that have emailed me and said, I read your book, I did all of it, and I'm an accredited investor now, or I'm almost financially independent, or I'm now earning passive income, and I did it all by myself just by reading your book and implementing the steps. For me, that's the coolest thing in the world.
Right. That's quite the testimonial to hear that. So now, I think that we also have a URL for our listeners to connect with that book, if I'm not mistaken, so that they can access that for themselves and be able to get this information, and just like those examples that you gave, be able to start their own journey in this process. And I always encourage people to consult with others, to reach out to people who have more knowledge and experience than themselves, so that they can gain from that, as we don't generally know everything coming out of the gates. And so learning from others is ultimately going to be the best way to do it. And it sounds like Jerry Feta, Fetta, for those that don't have that spelling, is somebody who will give you that information, has a lot out there, and your company, Wealth Dynamics, is continuing to develop more and more content, including content about the recent bank failures, which is something that is current and very relevant at this time in this year, 2023.
Can I give the URL for that ebook? It's a free download. I'd love for people to have that. So that's just jerryfeta.com/bank fail. So just my first and last name.com/bank fail. And that's a free download, free ebook. That also has a free course as well, video course. So definitely, interesting times. A lot of that has happened in the last month or two, which is reminiscent of 2008 in some ways. So as much as we can get the information to people on how to protect against that, that's kind of the goal with the book.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'll make sure to include that as well with the show notes. Now, one other question I like to ask all my guests, Jerry, if you were to be handed $1 million today with no strings attached, how would you invest that in your business or another endeavor, and why?
So the first thing that I would do is I would invest in my own personal development, and that's
Hmm.
probably like not the full million. That's probably
Yeah.
maybe 100,000 to 200,000 of just getting all the information that I need to learn, and that's lining that up probably for the next several
Yeah.
years of study and courses and networking.
Yep.
The rest of it I would take and I would put that into income producing real estate,
Okay.
and then pretty much just forget it exists.
Sure.
And that would make me feel broke again and give me the necessity level to go produce more income in my business. And that'll just sit there
Yeah.
and grow in the background while I earn active income and convert that into more passive income.
Okay. Okay. So it's that balance of earning active income, putting it into assets that can produce passive income so that can continue to grow over time and overtake the active income to where now you have that choice whether you continue that job that you're doing or that business that you're operating or you do something else. You now have that choice essentially. So,
Exactly. And it makes me not feel too comfortable because a
yeah.
million dollars cash, that can make a
Mhm.
guy feel like he's set and he doesn't need to do
Sure.
anything else. So
Yeah.
it gives you that healthy discomfort to keep growing and
Yeah.
producing.
Absolutely. I like that answer. Now, as we mentioned, easy to find Jerry on social media, Jerry Feta. He's on all the different social media channels. YouTube is a very large place to locate his resources. Look up the book, jerryfeta.com/bankfail. And then we'll also include the URL for the Blueprint to Financial Freedom as well. So, Jerry, I want to thank you again for sharing your story and the work that you're doing now because you're absolutely changing lives and changing histories going forward for generations.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me on, Zach. It's been a blast.